Hey, this is part 2 of the Magic of Modding tutorial. In the last video, we just set everything up. And in this one, we are going to actually create the mod. We're going to add text attached to each player that shows their actual health values, so current health and maximum health. Before we get into that, let's have a look at what the sample mod is actually doing. So on in-game update, we have subscribed to that. So every time the game updates, it will call our function, HP numbers update. And in update, we are getting the list of peers in the game. Then we're looping over all of those peers and generating a markup. Markup is just like UI info on how to draw and what to draw. And then we're actually drawing that markup. As we saw in the last video, it actually adds text that shows the player's position. So we're just going to update that to be instead the player's health. And you can see kind of how it's working here. So we make a markup that has properties. You can have both a texture and text. And then each of those have sub-properties. So like a string would be what text is showing, the position it's drawn, if the text is centered or not, or if the image is centered or not. And we don't really need a texture for this, so I'm actually just going to get rid of that. And then this is where I guess some of the magic comes in. As we loop over the players, we want to actually give the UI drawing data which player is being drawn. That way it knows where to actually put it. And you'll see here position is not actually a coordinate. So you could do something like this. So X, Y, Z, where Z is like which one's closer to the screen. So the further away it is, the lower the value. It will still look the same on the screen. It's like if two images or text are on top of each other, we're in the same position, but one is at Z9, it will be behind the one at Z10. But rather than giving it an actual position, we're passing in a function. That way, every time it's updating the markup here, it will actually run our function to get the value instead of just using what was defined, like if you were to just put in an actual hard-coded value. So we can see here, this function is up here. And it will pass in, it'll always pass in when you have a function here, condition arguments. So we're saving which player it's attached to in the condition arguments, so that later when we're actually drawing it on the screen, we know who it's attached to. So we'll get condition arguments, and then so we're just going to get the pure ID, condition arguments dot pure ID. If for some reason it's missing, I'm just going to put something here. And then we're converting from the world position to screen coordinates. We're getting where the unit is from the pure ID. So essentially those, the stack of functions here will use the pure ID, convert that into a unit, from that unit get its position, and then from that position in the world, convert it to screen coordinates and return that as a vector. Then the UI will draw it at that position. And we're doing essentially the same thing with the text. So we could, for example here, something really nice. So if we want that to be on the player, that's what will be there. Or we could give it a function. So it'll call that function, and then essentially whatever that function returns will be drawn instead. So let's just test this to see if it actually draws something really nice on those players. Again, just drag and drop in, compile, it'll automatically install for you, launch, and let's pop into the training grounds. So you can see here, it says something really nice, which is maybe arguably the nicest mod, but not that exciting. So let's put that back, and then instead modify this function. Instead of giving the position or something really nice, let's get the actual health values. So in get text overlay, again, we are just getting the person it's attached to. So we're converting from that person's ID to an actual unit, and then from that unit to a position, which is what we want to get rid of here. So let's get the player's health instead. And you know what, maybe it'd be a bit cleaner if we make some new variables instead of just putting it all into one line here. So actually, I've already forgotten here, but it looks like we have something where we can just give a pure ID, and it will return that data about that player. So you don't even need to get the unit. Whoops. Okay, and then in here, we want to get the health. And then my health is going to be an integer value. So we want to convert that to a string. I think it would actually automatically convert anyway, but just in case. Or if, for example, health was nil, it'll have nil. Kind of a way to stop it from crashing there. Let's save and then recompile that, see what it does. And again, hop into the training grounds. Aha! So we can see I have 950 health. So we know that is working now. If we take damage, it goes down. But you'll see if we die, it does stay there, which I don't necessarily want to happen. Maybe we'll fix that later. But we're also missing the actual maximum value of your health. So I think it'd be more interesting to show both. In here, we're just going to add another line. And I'm not entirely sure if it is max health. So we can go over to our documentation. And in here, it should say yep, max health. Then we're going to want to format these two together. So it'll show your health and max health. To smush two strings together, you can put 2 dots. If you've coded in C# or a lot of other languages, it'll just be like a 1 string and then plus. But in Lua, it's actually 2 dots instead of a plus. Let's kind of decorate that so it has a slash in between. And then, there we go. And let's see how that looks. And there we go. So you can definitely see my health going down, and you can see the max health. But it's not really in an ideal position here. What I want it to do is be above the player. To do that, let's actually change the function we're using to get the position. With the sample mod, there's actually 2 functions, get player screen position and also get player screen position offset. I think the offset is a little bit much, but let's just see what that looks like. And just to kind of go over what it does here, you can see it from the player ID gets its unit, gets that unit's position. At that position, add in a vector 3. So it's going to add an offset of -0.5. So it'll move a little bit further that way. And then in the game world, up 3. And then convert that position to screen coordinates. I might hopefully in the future streamline this whole process of building your mod so that we can just have a project open and build it every time we make a change rather than having to drag and drop it in every time. Oh, and yeah, we can definitely see that's up there. I might want to change that a little bit though. It is a bit high. So I'll move it down just a tick. And then you'll also might be thinking, well, in update, every frame we're building this entire markup, which really isn't that efficient. Because every frame we're essentially remaking this whole table and passing in those values again. Instead, what we could do is make one markup for every single player and attach it to them when they actually join the lobby. Or when that unit is actually created and set up, rather. And then that markup itself should stick to that player through the whole game. And if they disconnect, it should just show nothing. To do that, let's actually delete most of this. We're not going to be needing update anymore. And instead, let's actually open up something else here. We have something called event hooks list. And these are all the functions that you can hook into. There's one special one in-game, which is players initialized. So on in-game init, I'm going to paste our code that was in update in here instead. And instead of when the match starts, let's put in when the players are initialized. Technically, when the match starts, the players aren't set up. So if we're going to loop over all those players and add a UI element attached to them, it won't appear because those players didn't exist yet. That's why you have to use a special players initialized. And we're going to do essentially exactly the same thing. But again, only once, essentially, instead of every frame. So we still want the player list, but this here, so we're going to make a new markup for each player once. And then instead of drawing it again every frame, we're going to make a new UI element. Tell it when it's going to be drawn. So we want the in-game UI element. You would change that to menu if you want it to be attached to something in the main menu. And then pass in the markup. Now, technically, that should actually be everything we need to get it drawing there. And it'll be a lot more efficient. I hope I saved that. And let's have a look. So after a second or two, oh, there we go. And I moved it down a little bit. So that's definitely looking pretty good. You will notice though that the text is always green. There is a default color, which is that kind of greenish color. And we're not actually changing that color at all. So if we play against the bot here, you'll notice when it gets its health bar, even though it's an enemy, it'll be green. I'm going to leave it to you guys to figure out how to do that. But there's a hint here. if you open up your documentation, unit functions, you can get the team. And color would be a table of RGB. So I guess that's actually the end of the tutorial. It was a lot faster than I thought it would be. Excited to see what everybody makes. Have a grape day.